London, 1943. The air was a constant churn of dust and despair, a grim testament to the nightly visits of German bombers. For Evelyn Hayes, a 28-year-old widow, the dust was also part of her job. She was a cleaner in one of Britain's most secret intelligence bunkers, a labyrinthine underground complex beneath Whitehall. Every sweep of her broom, every polish of a desk, was a small act of defiance against the chaos above ground. It had been a year since Thomas, her brilliant engineer husband, was taken by a stray bomb during an air raid. The grief still clung to her, a heavy shroud, but she pushed it down, focusing on the rhythmic, almost meditative work. Her younger sister, 10-year-old Sarah, depended on her. Sarah spent her days in the communal air raid shelters, a small, pale face among dozens, and Evelyn's heart ached with every siren's wail, a silent prayer for her sister's safety. The bunker itself was a world apart. Cold, damp concrete walls echoed with the hushed, urgent whispers of men in uniform. Maps covered every surface, crisscrossed with lines, marked with strategic pins. Telephones rang incessantly, their sharp trills cutting through the hum of typewriters and the low murmur of classified conversations. Evelyn was a ghost in these halls, moving unseen, unheard, yet absorbing the palpable tension that permeated every corner. She'd learned to recognize the subtle shifts in atmosphere, the slight tightening around an officer's eyes, the sharper tone in a general's voice, clues to the ebb and flow of a war that felt both distant and terrifyingly close. She overheard fragments: U-boat sightings, Luftwaffe sorties, coastal defenses. They were just words to her, pieces of a puzzle she wasn't meant to solve. She focused on the task at hand, on the small, manageable order she could bring to this vital, frantic place. Her fingers, calloused from scrubbing, often ached, but the ache was a comforting reminder that she was still here, still contributing, still alive. The smell of disinfectant mixed with stale tobacco smoke and the faint metallic tang of old paper was the scent of her new life, a stark contrast to the scent of roses Thomas used to bring her from the garden. The flickering fluorescent lights cast long, distorted shadows, making the already grim environment feel even more oppressive. Evelyn often found herself pausing, broom in hand, just listening. Not eavesdropping, not intentionally, but simply taking in the sounds of a nation at war, operating from its hidden depths. She saw the exhaustion etched on the faces of the officers, the dark circles under their eyes, the slumped shoulders. They were fighting their own battles in these dim corridors, battles of strategy and intelligence. She wondered what they truly knew, what horrors they anticipated. Each new day brought a fresh layer of dust, a fresh challenge for her, and a fresh wave of anxiety for the city above. She pushed her cart, the squeak of its wheels, the only sound in the otherwise quiet corridor she was cleaning, heading towards the next section. If you're finding this story compelling, don't forget to hit that subscribe button to follow Evelyn's journey and many more stories of courage and resilience. Weeks later, Evelyn was assigned a new area, the office of Major Davies, an intelligence officer who had recently died under mysterious circumstances. A sudden heart attack, the official line went. The room had been sealed ever since, a silent testament to a life abruptly ended. The air inside was heavy and stagnant, thick with the smell of old paper and something else, something metallic and faintly unsettling. Dust motes danced in the single beam of sunlight that struggled through the grime-covered window high on the wall. Evelyn pushed the heavy wooden door open with a grunt, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the room was a jumble of discarded reports, overflowing ashtrays, and a general air of disarray, as if Davies had been interrupted mid-thought. She began her work methodically, emptying the wastebaskets, wiping down the vast mahogany desk, and straightening the stacks of files that seemed to lean precariously on every surface. It was a tedious task, but Evelyn found a strange comfort in it. It was a small act of bringing order to chaos, a way to reclaim a space from the shadow of death. As she worked, she felt a peculiar sense of unease. The official story of Davis's death didn't quite sit right with her. He was a man known for his robust health, a former athlete, and the suddenness of his demise had raised hushed whispers among the other staff, whispers of stress, or worse, foul play. Evelyn, pragmatic to her core, usually dismissed such talk, but in the oppressive silence of his office, a flicker of doubt ignited within her. She moved to a heavy oak desk, older than the others in the bunker, its surface scarred with decades of use. As she began to clean the top, her rag caught on something underneath. She knelt, peering into the shadows. The underside of the desk had a loose panel in the wood, barely noticeable unless you were looking for it. Her fingers, accustomed to probing into hidden corners, explored the gap. Her heart gave a sudden lurch when she felt something tucked inside, something thin and crisp. It felt like paper. With a cautious tug, she pulled it free. It was an envelope, old and worn, tucked into a concealed compartment. It was surprisingly heavy. There was no name on the outside, no address, just a faint, almost invisible stamp of the War Office. Her breath hitched. Inside, nestled amongst several ordinary-looking papers, was a single folded sheet. As she unfolded it, her eyes scanned the lines of precise, coded text, interspersed with strange symbols and references to unfamiliar coastal towns. The words meant nothing to her, yet an inexplicable dread began to creep through her veins. It looked important, too important to be merely discarded. A cold knot formed in her stomach. What had Major Davies been working on, and why had this been hidden? The air in the room, already heavy, seemed to press down on her. The letter felt heavy in Evelyn's hands, a physical manifestation of the impossible burden it suddenly placed upon her. Her mind raced, a chaotic swirl of fear and urgency. She, a mere cleaner, had stumbled upon something that clearly wasn't meant for her eyes. The coded message, while unintelligible, radiated an undeniable sense of importance, a gravity that chilled her to the bone. Her first instinct was to put it back, to pretend she had never seen it, to let the secrets of Major Davies remain buried. The thought of getting involved in something so far beyond her station, so potentially dangerous, was terrifying. Who was she to meddle in the affairs of generals and strategists? She thought of Sarah, her small, trusting face. If this letter truly contained information about an impending attack, then Sarah, along with countless others, would be in even greater peril. The memory of Thomas, lying beneath the rubble, flashed before her eyes. He had been a man of quiet conviction, always believing in doing the right thing, no matter how small. His silent voice seemed to echo in her mind, urging her forward. The fear of inaction, of letting innocent lives be lost when she held a potential key to their safety, slowly began to outweigh her fear of consequences. Evelyn carefully folded the letter and slipped it into the pocket of her apron, her movements precise and automatic, belying the turmoil within. She finished her cleaning of Davis's office, her hands now trembling slightly, her mind miles away. Each rustle of paper, each creak of the old floorboards sounded amplified, as if the bunker itself was watching her, judging her. As she left the sealed office, she glanced back at the heavy wooden door, a shiver running down her spine. The secret was now hers. She knew she couldn't simply hand the letter to just anyone. She was a cleaner. Her word carried no weight. She'd be dismissed, perhaps even interrogated. Her position as an invisible worker, usually a shield, now felt like a cage. She needed to find someone who would listen, someone who would believe her, someone who had the authority to act. The sheer enormity of the task ahead felt overwhelming. The rigid hierarchy of the military establishment, the suspicion of outsiders, the very real dangers of wartime espionage, all stood as formidable obstacles. Evelyn returned to her small, shared flat in the bomb-scarred East End, the letter pressed against her chest, its silent presence a constant nagging reminder of the monumental task she had unwittingly taken on. The decision was made. She had to act. The next few days were a blur of nervous attempts and disheartening rejections. Evelyn tried to approach various officers, always with the same result. A brusque wave of the hand, a polite but firm dismissal. A raised eyebrow followed by a dismissive, "That's not your concern, dear." Her uniform, her broom, her very presence as a cleaner acted as an impenetrable barrier. To them, she was part of the background, a silent fixture, certainly not someone who could possess information vital to national security. She even tried leaving the letter discreetly on a desk, hoping it would be discovered by someone with authority, but it was simply returned to her, a note attached. "Lost property, ma'am." It was a disheartening cycle of hope and despair. One morning, she spotted Captain Arthur Davies, no relation to the deceased major, a young, earnest intelligence officer she'd seen poring over maps late into the night. He seemed less cynical, perhaps more approachable than the others. Gathering her courage, she waited for him to be alone, cleaning near his office. "Excuse me, Captain," she began, her voice a little shaky. I found something important." She tried to explain about the letter, the hidden compartment, the urgency she felt. Captain Davies listened patiently, a polite, almost pitying smile on his face. He nodded, but his eyes glazed over with skepticism. "Mrs. Hayes, I appreciate your diligence, but these are sensitive times. We have strict protocols for handling information. Perhaps you simply found an old, discarded document." He gestured vaguely, clearly trying to be kind, but equally clearly dismissing her. "The Major kept many personal notes, I'm sure." He then steered the conversation gently but firmly towards her duties, asking if she had finished cleaning the mess hall. Evelyn's shoulders slumped. She was just a cleaner. Her words were just noise to them. The frustration gnawed at her, a burning ember in her gut. How could she make them understand? The very invisibility she usually enjoyed was now her greatest enemy. She left the bunker that evening, feeling utterly defeated. The bombs continued their nightly assault, and each explosion felt like a personal failure. Sarah's wide, innocent eyes, looking to her for reassurance, intensified Evelyn's resolve. She couldn't give up. The city, her sister, deserved more. She sat at her small kitchen table, the letter spread out before her. She needed an ally, someone who saw beyond her uniform, someone who understood the true meaning of overlooked details. The task ahead felt monumental, but giving up felt like a betrayal. Don't miss the unfolding drama. Hit subscribe now to catch every twist and turn of Evelyn's perilous mission. Desperation led Evelyn to Elsie, the bunker's switchboard operator. Elsie was a woman in her late 50s, with sharp, observant eyes that seemed to miss nothing, despite her outwardly unassuming demeanor. She had been at the bunker since the beginning of the war, a living repository of gossip, whispered secrets, and an uncanny ability to read people. Evelyn had often seen Elsie exchange knowing glances with various officers, a silent communication that spoke of years of shared experience and mutual respect. Elsie was also an outsider in her own way, tucked away in her small, cramped booth, privy to every incoming and outgoing call, yet rarely directly involved in the decision-making. One quiet afternoon during Elsie's tea break, Evelyn approached her. Elsie was sipping weak tea from a chipped mug, her eyes scanning the daily newspaper. "Elsie," Evelyn began, her voice low and urgent, "I need your help. I've found something." She quickly, yet carefully, recounted the story of Major Davies's office, the hidden compartment, and the coded letter. She pulled the letter from her pocket, unfolding it on the small, scratched table between them. Elsie's eyes, usually so sharp and lively, became serious, tracing the lines of the coded text. She didn't dismiss Evelyn, didn't patronize her. Instead, she listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Show me the office," Elsie finally said, her voice surprisingly firm, "and tell me exactly where you found it." Together, they made their way back to Major Davis's office. Evelyn pointed to the loose panel under the desk. Elsie ran her fingers along the worn wood, a thoughtful expression on her face. Davies was a careful man, she mused. Private. He wouldn't have just left something like this lying around. Back at the switchboard, Elsie examined the letter again. This looks like a standard naval cipher, but with some unusual alterations. Elsie's years of listening to coded messages pass through her lines had given her an intuitive understanding of such things. Even if she couldn't decrypt them herself, she knew enough to know when something felt off, when a pattern deviated. "I can't decrypt it, Evelyn, not without the proper equipment and codes," Elsie explained, her voice hushed. "But I know someone who might be able to help us. An old friend, a cryptographer who retired from military service due to ill health. He lives quietly in a small cottage outside London." A spark of hope ignited in Evelyn's chest. Elsie understood. Elsie believed her. It was a lifeline in the overwhelming sea of indifference. "It's risky, Evelyn," Elsie warned, her gaze unwavering. "Very risky. We'd be going outside official channels. But if this is what you say it is, we don't have time for the usual bureaucracy." Evelyn nodded, her resolve hardening. "I understand the risk, Elsie, but I have to know. For Sarah. For everyone." The journey to the cryptographer's cottage was fraught with a quiet tension. Elsie managed to secure a day off, feigning a family emergency, and they took a slow, crowded train out of bomb-scarred London, the landscape gradually shifting from urban rubble to rolling green hills. Evelyn clutched the letter, its weight a constant reminder of their perilous mission. Elsie, usually talkative, was subdued, her eyes scanning the other passengers, ever vigilant. The risk they were taking was immense. If caught operating outside official channels, they could be accused of treason. They arrived at a small, secluded cottage, nestled amidst overgrown gardens, a haven of peace seemingly untouched by the war. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. A frail, elderly man with remarkably sharp, intelligent eyes answered the door. This was Mr. Silas Finch, Elsie's retired cryptographer friend. He was thin, his shoulders stooped, but his mind was clearly as sharp as ever. Elsie quickly introduced Evelyn and explained their predicament, omitting no detail, while Mr. Finch listened intently, his expression unreadable. He took the letter, his long, delicate fingers tracing the coded symbols. He moved slowly to a cluttered desk, pulling out various magnifying glasses, charts, and thick, worn books. The silence in the small cottage was broken only by the scratching of his pen as he made notes, and the occasional cough that racked his frail frame. Hours passed. Evelyn and Elsie waited, their nerves stretched taut, the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner marking the agonizing passage of time. The sun began to set, casting long, purple shadows across the room. Finally, Mr. Finch leaned back, a look of profound concern on his face. "This is a complex cipher," he stated, his voice raspy, "but it's not entirely unfamiliar. It's a variant of an Enigma code, with a unique key, likely changed recently. The references, they point to a specific set of coastal defenses." He tapped a finger on the letter. "And the dates, they indicate a large-scale amphibious landing within the next 2 weeks, on the east coast, near Suffolk." Evelyn gasped, a cold dread seizing her. The information was real. The threat was imminent. Mr. Finch detailed the specifics as best he could, outlining the strategic implications of such an attack, the potential targets, and the sheer scale of the German intent. "This isn't a minor skirmish, ladies," he concluded, his voice grave. "This is a major offensive, and it seems your intelligence service is completely unaware of its specifics." The reality of the situation hit Evelyn with full force. They had vital information, but how could they possibly make the authorities believe them now? Their quiet act of defiance had just become a race against time. Armed with Mr. Finch's deciphered fragments and his expert assessment, Evelyn and Elsie returned to London, the weight of their discovery pressing down on them. The city seemed louder, the sirens more piercing, the shadows longer. They knew they couldn't go through official channels without risking their own liberty, possibly even their lives. Elsie, using her network of discreet contacts, managed to arrange a clandestine meeting with a junior officer she trusted implicitly, Lieutenant Thomas Sterling. Sterling was a sharp, ambitious young man, but more importantly, he possessed a rare quality in the bureaucratic world of the bunker, an open mind. He was known for questioning the status quo and for his unwavering dedication to protecting his country. The meeting took place in a dimly lit, smoky pub in a quiet corner of Mayfair, far from the prying eyes of the War Office. Evelyn, dressed in her usual drab clothes, felt out of place among the patrons in their finer attire, but her purpose lent her an unshakable resolve. Sterling arrived promptly, his eyes wary but curious. Elsie wasted no time, presenting the letter and Mr. Finch's findings in a concise, urgent manner. Evelyn, her heart pounding, added her observations about Major Davies's office, the hidden compartment, and the peculiar silence surrounding his death. Sterling listened intently, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a flicker of professional interest. He scrutinized the letter, his gaze sharp and intelligent. "This is highly irregular," he murmured. "But the details, they align with some unconfirmed aerial reconnaissance reports we've been getting, vague hints of unusual activity along that stretch of coast." He paused, his fingers tapping on the table. "And Major Davies. His death was indeed sudden. There were whispers he was on to something big, but no one could pin it down." The realization dawned on Sterling. The cleaner and the switchboard operator, two people normally invisible within the intelligence apparatus, held a piece of information that could potentially avert a catastrophe. The gravity of the situation was palpable. "I'll need to verify this," Sterling said, his voice now devoid of any doubt. "I'll take this directly to my commanding officer, Major Caldwell. He's a stern man by the book, but he values good intelligence above all else." He hesitated. "But understand, Mrs. Hayes, Miss Elsie, if this is wrong, or if this leaks before it's properly vetted, there will be serious repercussions for all of us." Evelyn and Elsie nodded in unison. They knew the risks, but they also knew the stakes. The clock was ticking, and London held its breath. This is just the beginning of a gripping tale. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a single chapter of Evelyn's race against time. Lieutenant Sterling worked quickly and discreetly. The very next morning, he cornered Major Caldwell, a formidable figure known for his piercing gaze and an almost legendary dedication to duty. Sterling presented the evidence with meticulous precision, carefully detailing how Evelyn, an unassuming cleaner, had discovered the hidden letter, Elsie's invaluable input, and Mr. Finch's expert decryption. Caldwell listened in stony silence, his expression unreadable, his eyes fixed on the letter. He asked probing questions, challenging every detail, trying to find a flaw in the narrative. Evelyn and Elsie, waiting anxiously in a small, windowless anteroom, felt every minute stretch into an eternity. They imagined the arguments, the skepticism, the dismissal. They knew the hierarchy they were up against, the deeply ingrained belief that vital intelligence could only come from established sources. But Sterling, armed with a newfound conviction, stood his ground, emphasizing the logical coherence of the information and the potential disaster if it were ignored. Finally, after what felt like hours, Caldwell emerged, his face still unyielding, but with a subtle shift in his demeanor. He looked directly at Evelyn and Elsie. "Mrs. Hayes, Miss Elsie," he said, his voice gruff but lacking its usual dismissive tone. "Lieutenant Sterling has vouched for your integrity, and the information, while unorthodox in its origin, appears to have merit." A wave of immense relief washed over Evelyn, so potent it almost buckled her knees. They had broken through. A glimmer of hope, tiny but potent, flickered in the bunker's dim lights. Caldwell continued, "We will initiate an immediate, high-priority investigation. A small team of cryptographers and tactical analysts will re-examine the letter and cross-reference it with existing intelligence. Lieutenant Sterling, you will lead this team." He turned to Elsie. "Miss Elsie, your unique knowledge of communications may prove invaluable. We will be in touch." He didn't acknowledge Evelyn directly after that, but his eyes met hers for a brief moment, a silent acknowledgement of her crucial role. The war machine was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to move. It wasn't full acceptance yet, not a pat on the back, but it was a critical first step. The battle to be heard was won. Now the battle to prevent an attack truly began. The next few days were a blur of intense activity within the bunker. Lieutenant Sterling, now working with a small, hand-picked team, put the letter at the core of their investigation. Elsie was called in to assist, her keen ear for unusual patterns in coded messages proving invaluable. They worked tirelessly, often through the night, fueled by strong tea and an overwhelming sense of urgency. The intelligence gleaned from the letter was cross-referenced with scattered reports of unusual German naval movements and an increase in reconnaissance flights over the specified coastal area. Slowly, painstakingly, the pieces of a terrifying puzzle began to fall into place. Evelyn, though not directly part of the tactical team, felt the shift in atmosphere. The hushed whispers were now more urgent, the officers' movements more purposeful. She continued her duties, sweeping and cleaning, but now with a heightened sense of purpose, her ears attuned to every scrap of conversation. She overheard fragments, confirming troop deployments, naval assets redirected, coastal battery alerts. The bunker, once a place of quiet, methodical work, now vibrated with a frantic energy. The initial skepticism from some quarters remained, but Major Caldwell's stern backing and Lieutenant Sterling's diligent work gradually eroded it. The evidence, though initially brought by a cleaner, was proving too substantial to ignore. The threat of a large-scale German landing on the Suffolk coast was now being taken seriously. Orders were issued, naval patrols were intensified, fighter squadrons were put on high alert. Defensive measures along the coastline were bolstered. It was a race against time, a silent battle fought in the dimly lit corridors of the bunker, dependent on the accurate deciphering of a single crucial letter. One particularly tense evening, as Evelyn was cleaning the main operations room, she overheard Sterling on the phone, his voice tight with urgency. "Confirmed. Enemy fleet movements detected offshore. They're making their approach." A wave of cold dread washed over her, quickly followed by a surge of grim satisfaction. The attack was coming, just as the letter predicted. But because of her, because of Elsie and Sterling, they were ready. She watched as officers scrambled, shouting orders, pointing at maps. The fate of countless lives, the security of a nation, hung in the balance, a balance tipped by a hidden letter found in a dusty office. The night the German attack was predicted to strike was a maelstrom of activity. Evelyn, along with all non-essential personnel, was ordered to the deep, reinforced sections of the bunker. She clutched Sarah's worn teddy bear, a small comfort in the suffocating anxiety. Above ground, the air raid sirens wailed, a familiar, chilling symphony of dread. But this time, there was a difference. The British defences were ready. The roar of naval gunfire echoed through the earth, a deep, resonant rumble that shook the very foundations of the bunker. It was followed by the sharp crackle of anti-aircraft fire and the distant thud of bombs. But unlike the chaotic, devastating raids of the past, these sounds were interspersed with the distinct, confident thunder of retaliatory fire. Evelyn, huddled with others, listened intently, straining to interpret the sounds of the battle raging above. She knew with a certainty that settled deep in her bones that this was different. Hours crawled by, each minute an eternity. Finally, as dawn approached, the sounds of battle began to subside. The air raid sirens gave way to the all-clear signal, a bittersweet, almost fragile melody. News began to filter through the bunker. The German landing attempt had been decisively repelled. Coastal batteries, alerted and reinforced, had unleashed a devastating barrage. Naval patrols, positioned exactly where the letter had indicated, had intercepted the invasion fleet. The losses were heavy on both sides, but the scale of the intended attack had been thwarted. A catastrophic invasion had been averted. Evelyn returned to her duties, her hands still trembling slightly, but with a new sense of quiet pride. She swept the halls, but the atmosphere was lighter, the faces of the officers showing a profound relief, even a quiet jubilation. She saw Lieutenant Sterling, exhausted but triumphant, shaking hands with Major Caldwell, who for the first time offered a genuine, if fleeting, smile. Neither Sterling nor Caldwell acknowledged Evelyn directly in that moment, but Elsie caught her eye, a knowing, grateful glance passing between the two women. Their quiet, extraordinary act had saved countless lives. Evelyn continued her work, the invisible cleaner, but she carried a profound secret within her. She had not only swept the halls of the bunker, but had, in her own unassuming way, helped sweep away a monumental threat. The war would continue, and loss would still come, but on this day, in this hidden bunker, an unsung victory had been won, not by generals or grand strategies alone, but by the courage of an ordinary woman who refused to be silenced. She was no longer just a cleaner, she was a quiet guardian, a testament to the power of vigilance and the strength of human connection in the darkest of times. And as she thought of Sarah, safe in her bed, a small, hopeful smile touched Evelyn's lips. Thank you for watching. She swept the bunker's halls. If you were moved by Evelyn's story and want to see more narratives of courage and resilience, please subscribe to our channel and join our community. Your support helps us bring more incredible stories to life.